Have you ever been in a room where every face looked more powerful than yours, and yet you knew you were the only one brave enough to speak the truth? What would you do if you, a janitor's daughter, discovered a secret clause that could destroy a billion-dollar company? Would you stay silent to keep your job, or risk everything to stop the lie? That night, high above the glittering skyline of New York City, a young girl named Mila Carter stood at the back of a boardroom meant for people far richer, older, and colder than her. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to speak. But when her eyes caught the hidden trap buried deep inside a merger contract, a single sentence that could ruin lives, she stepped forward and said the words no one expected. "Excuse me, but this clause is a trap." In that instant, time stopped. The CEO froze mid-signature. The suits stared in disbelief. How could a girl who cleaned their floors see what their million-dollar lawyers missed? If you were her, would you dare to interrupt power itself? Would you risk humiliation, or even danger, just to protect strangers who'd never even see your face? Because sometimes, the hardest fight isn't against others, it's against your own fear. This is not just a story about courage. It's about conscience, about one voice strong enough to make giants tremble. So before we begin, take a moment, like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear might just make you ask yourself, would I have spoken up, too? The pen stopped midair. The sound of the city faded behind the glass walls of the 30th floor boardroom, leaving only the whisper of recycled air and the soft hum of a projector. Every gaze in that room turned toward the doorway, where a young girl in a faded janitor's uniform stood, clutching a clipboard that wasn't hers. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady, low, and far too calm for her age. "But this clause is a trap." For a full second, no one moved. Ethan Reynolds, CEO of Coleman Capital Group, froze with his signature pen poised above a thick stack of merger documents. His silver-gray hair gleamed under the recessed lighting, his tailored suit flawless. His expression caught somewhere between disbelief and irritation. Around him, a circle of executives shifted in their chairs. Some frowned, some smirked. None spoke. The girl's badge read Maintenance Crew. Her name, printed in small black letters, was Mila Carter. She couldn't have been more than 17. "Excuse me," Ethan finally asked, his voice even, controlled. Mila stepped forward, one sneaker squeaking against the marble tile. "Page 22, she said, tapping the folder with her finger. "The liability clause flips the responsibility. If you sign this, sir, Coleman Capital takes the fall every lawsuit, every fraud claim, every cent of loss after the merger. Turner Global walks away clean." A murmur spread through the boardroom like a draft of cold wind. At the far end of the table, a man with a polished grin. Blake Turner, founder of Turner Global, let out a quiet, practiced laugh. "Miss," he said, drawing out the word as if tasting it, "do you even know what liability means?" Mila didn't blink. "Yes, sir. It means when things go wrong, someone has to pay for it. And from what I read, that someone would be Mr. Reynolds." The room stilled again. At the head of the table, Victoria Reynolds, elegant in a slate-gray dress, shifted uncomfortably beside her husband. "Ethan," she said under her breath, "she shouldn't be here. She's the janitor's kid." Mila's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. 8 hours ago, she'd been wiping fingerprints off the same glass doors. 8 hours ago, she'd been invisible. Now every eye in the room was on her. The story of how she got there started the night before. It was nearly midnight when Mila followed her mother, Linda Carter, through the gleaming lobby of Coleman Tower. The place smelled like lemon polish and money. Her mother carried a bucket and vacuum strapped with duct tape. Mila carried an old radio tuned low to some soft jazz station that helped her keep rhythm while cleaning. "Don't wander off," Linda had said, not looking up from the elevator buttons. "They got cameras on every corner here." "I know, Mom," Mila murmured, "just helping." The elevator chimed at the 29th floor. The doors opened onto a hallway so quiet it made her heartbeat sound loud. She moved through the offices carefully, wiping down glass panels, collecting half-empty coffee cups, and sorting shredded paper into recycling bins. That was when she saw it, the folder left sitting in the copier tray. The cover page read, "Final Draft, Merger Agreement, Confidential." She shouldn't have touched it. She knew that. But curiosity had always been the thing her mother called both her gift and her trouble. So she opened it. At first, the words made little sense, legal jargon, structured paragraphs, and the kind of language meant to lull readers into agreement. But line by line, her eyes picked up rhythm, and one line stopped her cold. Subparagraph C, Section 14. All post-merger liabilities shall be transferred in full to the acquiring entity. Transferred, not shared, not limited. It meant Coleman Capital, her boss's company, would carry the entire burden if anything went wrong. It was small, clever, buried deep, and wrong. "Mom," she whispered down the hall. "You ever seen a contract that hands over everything like this?" Linda poked her head out from an office. "Mila, what are you doing with that? Put it back before someone sees you." "But Mom, if they sign this enough," her mother hissed. "We don't get paid to read their papers. We clean them. That's how we keep food on the table." Mila fell silent, but the thought wouldn't leave her. That clause, it wasn't a mistake. It was bait. Now, standing in that boardroom, facing suits worth more than her family's apartment, she felt the same chill she'd felt reading that line. Ethan leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing. "You're saying this document transfers liability to us?" "Yes, sir," Mila replied softly. "It's written like protection, but it's a setup. If your lawyers didn't read carefully, that's what it's meant to do." Blake Turner's smile thinned. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You're letting a janitor's kid interrupt a multimillion-dollar deal." But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. He turned the pages, scanning, his eyes catching on that sub-paragraph, the same one Mila had pointed to. His jaw tightened. Silence fell. For a moment, only the soft buzz of the projector filled the air. "Security," Victoria whispered. "Please remove her." 2 guards stepped forward. Mila didn't fight it. She looked back one last time straight into Ethan's eyes, and for a brief, electric second, he didn't see a janitor's daughter. He saw the truth he'd almost signed away. His pen never touched the paper. Outside, as the elevator doors closed around her, Mila's reflection blurred in the mirrored walls. Her heart raced, but her eyes stayed calm. Somewhere above, a deal had just died, and somewhere deep inside, something far greater had just begun. The sound of the elevator doors closing still echoed in Mila's head as she sat on the edge of her narrow bed, shoes unlaced, staring at the ceiling fan that clicked unevenly with every slow turn. Outside, the city was wide awake, the rumble of late-night buses, the hiss of steam rising from street grates, the low murmur of televisions behind thin apartment walls. Her mother's voice came from the kitchen, soft but tired, a lullaby wrapped in worry. "Don't stay up too late." Baby, you've got school tomorrow." Mila didn't answer right away. She looked at her hands, small, cracked from bleach and cleaning fluid. They didn't look like the hands of a girl who belonged in boardrooms. Yet tonight, those same hands had stopped a billionaire from signing a deal that could have ruined him. It didn't feel real. Maybe it wasn't. "Mom," she called quietly, "do you ever think maybe we're meant for something different?" Linda paused, her silhouette framed in the doorway, apron still tied around her waist. "Different how? I don't know," Mila said. "Just something more than mopping floors for people who don't even see us." Her mother sighed, setting down the sponge. "Honey, people like us don't get to choose what we're meant for. We just do what we have to. You understand?" Mila nodded, but inside her chest, something resisted. She wanted to believe her mother, but the memory of the conference room kept replaying Ethan's shocked expression, Victoria's sharp whisper, Blake Turner's smirk. She hadn't imagined that tension. Something was wrong with that deal, and she had seen it. She lay down, but sleep refused to come. When the morning light slipped through the blinds, she knew things wouldn't go back to normal. The next evening, Coleman Tower glittered like a silver monolith against the dark Manhattan sky. Mila and her mother entered through the service entrance, as they always did. The scent of disinfectant mingled with the faint aroma of expensive coffee drifting down from the upper floors. Linda handed her a rag and smiled faintly. "Let's keep it quiet tonight. I heard the merger team's still working late. Don't go wandering." "Okay." Mila nodded, but curiosity flickered again, the same spark that had pulled her to that folder the night before. She couldn't stop thinking about the words she'd read. She needed to see if what she'd found was real or if she had just misunderstood. When Linda moved down the hall with the vacuum, Mila slipped into a small copy room near the executive suites. The hum of printers filled the space. She opened the recycling bin, scanning through discarded drafts. And there it was again, the same header merger agreement. Turner Global and Coleman Capital. She flipped through the pages, eyes darting until she found the section she remembered. There it was. All post-merger liabilities shall be transferred in full to the acquiring entity. The line that had burned itself into her brain. It was still there, unchanged. Her pulse quickened. She took out her phone and snapped a photo of the page. Then another of the signature line left blank. Just as she tucked the folder back, footsteps echoed in the hallway. She turned. "Who's in here?" a man's voice demanded. Mila froze. It was one of the security guards, a tall man with a shaved head and a clipboard. "I was just cleaning." "Sir," she said quickly. "The copier jammed." He frowned, but waved her out. "Be careful. These floors aren't for wandering staff." She nodded and hurried away, heart pounding. She didn't tell her mother what she had done. Not yet. By the time they finished their shift, it was nearly 2 hours. Milm. The subway platform was nearly empty. Linda leaned against a pillar, eyes heavy. "You've been quiet all night," she said. "Something wrong." Mila hesitated. "Mom, if you saw someone about to make a huge mistake, would you stop them?" Her mother chuckled softly. "Honey, if it's not my mistake, I don't interfere. That's how people like us survive. But what if that mistake hurts a lot of people?" Linda's expression darkened. "You don't go around saving the world, Mila, not when you're barely saving yourself." Mila looked away, her throat tight. Maybe her mother was right, but the image of that contract wouldn't leave her mind. It wasn't just about money. It was about right and wrong. When the train screeched into the station, they stepped inside and sat across from each other. The fluorescent light flickered. Linda closed her eyes, drifting toward sleep. Mila watched her mother's hands resting on her lap, calloused, steady, tired. She wanted to make those hands rest someday. The following morning, chaos erupted. As soon as they arrived at Coleman Tower, two men in suits from HR were waiting by the security desk. "Mrs. Carter," one said formally, "you and your daughter will need to come with us." Linda's face went pale. "Is something wrong? We just need to ask a few questions." They were escorted to a small room behind the lobby. The air smelled like coffee and toner. Across the table sat a woman in a navy blazer, neat and cold. "I'm Ms. Thompson, from Human Resources," she began. "There's been a disturbance reported during last night's meeting. A member of the maintenance team allegedly entered an executive conference without clearance." Linda looked horrified. "My daughter would never." "I did," Mila interrupted quietly. Her mother turned to her, eyes wide. "Mila." Mila clasped her hands together. "I saw a document being signed that didn't make sense. I tried to stop it." "Ms." Thompson's expression didn't change. "You understand that's a serious breach of company protocol." "Yes, ma'am, but I think I prevented something worse." Linda reached for her arm. "Stop talking," she whispered. "But Ms." Thompson continued, "effective immediately, both of you are placed on leave pending review. You'll be contacted within 10 business days." It sounded polite, but the meaning was clear. They were suspended. As they left the building, Linda's eyes glistened. "Do you have any idea what you've done? We could lose everything." "I know," Mila whispered. "But if I hadn't said something, Mr. Reynolds would have signed that deal." Linda stopped walking. "And you think that matters more than keeping a roof over our heads?" Mila didn't answer. The wind off the Hudson felt sharp and raw. She stared up at the glass tower that rose into the gray morning sky. Somewhere up there, people were probably already rewriting her story, turning her from witness to troublemaker. But she knew what she had seen. She would hold on to that truth, even if no one else believed it. That night, she sat by the window of their apartment, watching the city lights flicker against the dark. Somewhere above, in a world of glass and power, decisions were being made. She could feel it, something in motion, bigger than her, but connected to her. Her phone buzzed once. No caller ID, just a message. "You did the right thing. Don't stop." She stared at the screen, heart racing. Whoever it was, they knew, and they were watching. The day after the meeting, the executive floor at Coleman Capital was unusually quiet. The blinds were half drawn, the air heavy with the kind of tension that lingered after something unspoken. Ethan Reynolds stood by the window, his hands in his pockets, watching the city move below. The streets looked small from here, almost harmless, but he could still hear the echo of that girl's voice. "Excuse me, but this clause is a trap." He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the line in the contract she had pointed out. He had checked it himself later that night, long after everyone left. She was right. The language was deceptive, buried so deep in the legal jargon that even his in-house counsel had missed it. Someone had put that clause there on purpose. His assistant, a thin man named Eric, stepped into the office. "Mr. Reynolds, the board wants to confirm whether the merger signing will be rescheduled." Ethan didn't turn around. "Tell them it's postponed until further notice." Eric hesitated. "Blake Turner called 3 times this morning." He sounded impatient. Ethan finally faced him. "Let him be impatient." The assistant nodded quickly and left, closing the glass door behind him. Ethan moved to his desk and opened the folder again. The words glared back at him like a stain he couldn't wash off. He remembered the look in Victoria's eyes when that girl had interrupted the brief flicker of something that wasn't surprise, but recognition. It bothered him. He picked up his phone and dialed her number. She didn't answer. Instead, he got a text. In a meeting. Talk later. He frowned. A meeting at 8 in the morning? Without notice. Not like her. He reached for the intercom. Eric, find out where Miss Reynolds is this morning. There was a pause. She said she was visiting Turner Global's offices. Sir. Ethan exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. Down on the 29th floor, the janitorial cart was gone. The space felt emptier without it, and he couldn't explain why that mattered. Across town, in a cramped apartment smelling faintly of detergent and burnt coffee, Mila sat at the kitchen table. Her laptop was open, its cracked screen glowing in the dim light. The photo she had taken of the contract stared back at her. Her mother moved around the kitchen silently, avoiding eye contact. Eat something, Linda said. You've been sitting there for hours. I'm not hungry. Linda slammed the cupboard door harder than she meant to. You think you're helping anyone by doing this? You're just making it worse. Mila looked up, eyes tired but steady. Mom, someone put that trap in the contract on purpose. It wasn't a mistake. Don't you get it? What I get, Linda said, lowering her voice, is that you talk to people who can ruin our lives. You stood in their world, and now we're the ones paying for it. Her voice cracked on the last word. Mila looked away. Guilt pressed against her ribs like a weight she couldn't shift. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown sender, again. They're meeting today. Don't trust what you see. Her pulse jumped. She typed back before she could stop herself. Who are you? No reply. Later that afternoon, Ethan arrived at the Plaza Hotel under the guise of a private luncheon. The maître d' recognized him immediately, leading him toward the gold-trimmed dining room reserved for corporate guests. As he reached the corner table, he stopped. Victoria sat there as wife, elegant as ever, laughter soft like silk. And across from her, Blake Turner leaned back in his chair, too relaxed, too familiar. Their champagne glasses clinked lightly. For a moment, Ethan couldn't move. He stood behind a marble column, heart hammering in his chest, watching as Blake placed a small flash drive on the table between them. Victoria slid it into her purse without hesitation. Something inside him twisted. He stepped back quietly, leaving the restaurant without being seen. Outside, the cold air hit his face like a warning. That night, Mila sat in her room, scrolling through job listings on her mother's old phone. Most were cleaning gigs, overnight shifts, low pay. She wasn't sure they would be able to pay rent next month. Then, a new email appeared in her inbox. The sender, Michael Farossi Proton Mail. Com. Subject, you were right. Her eyes widened. She clicked it open. I worked at Coleman Capital 2 years ago. I know that contract. I know what Turner and Reynolds' wife are doing. You saw the tip of it. They've been shifting liabilities through shell companies offshore. If you want proof, meet me tomorrow night at the old library on 5th, midnight. Don't tell anyone. Mila's hands trembled. She reread the message twice. Her first instinct was fear. What if it was a trap? But something in her gut told her it was real. She didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, she printed the message and folded it into her notebook. The next morning, Ethan called his lawyer, Olivia Grant. He said, when she answered, I need you to look into something discreetly. Her voice came calm and professional. What kind of something? Fraud? Or betrayal? Maybe both. There was a pause. Does this have to do with Turner Global? Ethan hesitated. And my wife. I see. Olivia's tone softened slightly. I'll look into it. But if you're right, you won't like what I find. He stared at the skyline outside his window. Find it anyway. When the call ended, Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the photo frame on his desk, him and Victoria at their wedding in Central Park, both smiling under a fall sky. He wondered how long that smile had been real. That night, Mila left home quietly. Linda had fallen asleep on the couch, an empty mug beside her. The city air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain. She wrapped her scarf tighter and walked the 12 blocks to the New York Public Library. The grand steps were empty. The lions that guarded the entrance looked ghostly under the streetlights. She checked her phone, 11:57. 3 minutes early. Inside. The library was silent except for the hum of a floor buffer somewhere deep in the halls. She walked past rows of old computers and stacks of dusty books until she saw him, a man in his 30s. Coat wrinkled, eyes tired. Michael Ross, she asked. He nodded. You're braver than I expected. You said you had proof. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Everything's here. Emails, transfers, even internal memos. Turner and Victoria Reynolds built a network of fake subsidiaries to move liabilities offshore. They planned to crash the merger and leave Coleman holding the debt. Mila's heart pounded. Why are you giving this to me? Because I can't go to the police. They think I'm paranoid. But you smiled faintly. You already made them nervous. Before she could respond, a noise echoed from the hall, a door creaking open, footsteps approaching. Michael's face changed. We've been followed. He pressed the drive into her hand. Run. She didn't ask twice. She ran down the marble corridor, breath loud in her ears, sneakers sliding on the floor. Behind her, she heard voices, sharp and urgent, but she didn't look back. Out on Fifth Avenue, the rain had started to fall. She slipped the flash drive into her jacket and disappeared into the night. At that moment, she didn't realize that this small piece of plastic would change everything for Ethan Reynolds, and for everyone standing in the glow of that glass tower. Rain soaked through Mila's jacket as she hurried down the empty street, clutching the flash drive like it was something alive. Every sound felt amplified, the hiss of a car tire through puddles, the faint hum of a traffic light, the slap of her own shoes on wet concrete. She didn't stop running until she reached her building, a faded red brick apartment on the Lower East Side. Her mother was still asleep when she slipped inside, breathless, dripping water onto the worn linoleum floor. She stood for a moment in the dark, listening to the sound of the city through the window. The adrenaline in her body was slowly giving way to something else, fear. Real fear. Whoever had followed Michael Ross wasn't done. Mila sat down on her bed and plugged the flash drive into her old laptop. It buzzed faintly, and a folder popped up on the screen. Inside were dozens of files, emails, scanned bank transfers, memos labeled confidential. Her fingers trembled as she opened the first one. From Victoria, Reynolds of Coleman Capital. Come to Blake. Turner Global. Net subject. He won't suspect a thing. Mila's stomach turned. She scrolled further. The messages outlined the plan. How Turner Global would transfer Coleman Capital's liabilities offshore, bankrupt the company, and quietly buy back the assets under a new name. Victoria's role was to push Ethan to sign without scrutiny, using her influence as both partner and wife. It was worse than Mila imagined. This wasn't just a bad deal. It was betrayal from the inside. She clicked another file, one that made her breath catch. It was labeled Project Raven. Inside was a list of payments made to offshore accounts in Zurich and the Cayman Islands. The recipients included Turner Global and an unnamed trustee tied to Victoria Reynolds. Then, the file abruptly vanished. The folder closed itself. The screen flashed. Access. Denied. No, Mila whispered. Clicking again. No, no, no. Her laptop froze. The files disappeared one by one, replaced by a blank screen. She yanked the flash drive out. But it was too late. The data was gone. The next second, her phone vibrated on the nightstand. A new message flashed. Nice try. Mila. Some doors should stay closed. Her hands went cold. Someone was watching someone who knew exactly what she had. At sunrise, Ethan Reynolds sat in his office staring at the skyline through the rain-streaked windows. The folder from the merger lay open in front of him. He'd been here all night, unable to leave. The door opened quietly. Olivia Grant stepped inside, her trench coat damp, hair pulled into a low knot. I found something, she said, setting down a USB drive on his desk. But you might want to brace yourself. Ethan exhaled slowly. Tell me, Turner's firm isn't just manipulating contracts. He's been setting up shell corporations over a dozen in offshore havens, each one used to drain funds from previous mergers. And your wife, Victoria, she authorized at least 3 of the transfers. Ethan's shoulders stiffened. You're certain I've seen the signatures? They're hers. He rubbed his temple, the weight of it sinking in. How long? Years? Maybe. Long before this merger. She's been moving pieces quietly, probably grooming Turner Global as her partner long before you even noticed him. The silence stretched until Olivia added softly, I'm sorry. Ethan. He looked up. Don't be. You just saved me from living another lie. He stood, walked to the window, and watched a taxi crawl through the intersection below. His reflection looked older today, lined with regret. What's your next step? Olivia asked. He turned. I need proof. Real proof. Enough to burn them both if I have to. That same morning, Mila brewed coffee for her mother before she left for work. She pretended everything was fine. Linda didn't notice the flash drive missing from her jacket or the tremor in Mila's voice. When her mother left, Mila sat back down at the table. The flash drive was still warm in her hand. If the files had been deleted, maybe they weren't gone forever. She remembered something Michael Ross said before the men appeared. They move everything offshore, but nothing truly disappears. She needed help, someone who could recover what was lost. After searching for an hour, she found an online forum for cybersecurity students. She posted anonymously, need help recovering deleted, encrypted files from a damaged drive. Confidential, urgent. Minutes later, a reply appeared. Meet me at Washington Square Park, by the fountain, 3 p.m. Bring the drive. The username read CipherKid. She hesitated, then typed, How do I know I can trust you? The answer came instantly. You don't. But whoever erased that data will find you before the police do. Ethan sat at the bar in the private lounge of the Roosevelt Club, his untouched scotch glinting in the low light. He wasn't drinking, he was watching. Across the room, through the reflection in a gold-rimmed mirror, he saw them, Victoria and Blake. They were seated close, too close, their voices low, their gestures practiced. He couldn't hear them, but he didn't need to. Victoria reached into her purse and handed Blake something small, a silver keycard. Ethan's heart sank. He stood, straightened his tie, and left quietly. Outside, the drizzle had turned into real rain. He pulled out his phone and dialed Olivia. "It's worse than you think," he said. "She's giving him access to something. Probably my private files. Then you need to secure everything now. Start with your home office." "I will," Ethan said. "And Olivia, if anything happens to me, make sure the truth gets out." At 3 o'clock sharp, Mila stood by the fountain in Washington Square Park, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The city buzzed around her, college students laughing, street performers drumming, pigeons scattering in bursts of wings. A boy about her age approached, wearing a dark hoodie and carrying a laptop. He stopped a few feet away. "You, Mila." She hesitated, then nodded. He grinned slightly. "Relax. I'm not a cop. I just like puzzles." She handed him the flash drive. "It's encrypted. Someone deleted everything." He turned it in his hand. "Nothing's ever really deleted. Give me 24 hours. Can you tell who sent the message that wiped it? Maybe. Depends on how good they are." He looked up at her. But whoever it was, this wasn't amateur work. Mila swallowed hard. "Then be careful." The boy smiled faintly. "You too, girl detective." That evening, Ethan arrived home. The penthouse was dark, except for the city glow spilling through the windows. Victoria was in the living room, wineglass in hand, eyes fixed on the skyline. "You're home early," she said without turning. "Where were you this morning?" She glanced back with a cool smile. "Out. Meetings. With Turner." Her smile froze. Just for a second. "Ethan, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything," he said, stepping closer. "I'm asking why my wife is helping a man who's trying to dismantle my company." Her voice sharpened. "You sound paranoid. Maybe you're letting that janitor's little interruption get into your head." He stopped. "You knew about that clause, didn't you?" The room went silent. Victoria's expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered just once, enough to tell him the truth he didn't want to see. Ethan turned away. "We're done." "You don't mean that," she said softly. "I do. And if you've tied yourself to Turner, you'd better pray he falls before I do." Later that night, Mila received another message from Michael Ross's email account. "Don't trust anyone from Coleman. They're watching you." She typed back, "Michael, what happened last night?" The reply came seconds later. "He's gone. There was no signature." She stared at the screen, pulse pounding. Whoever sent that wasn't Michael. And now, she realized, she wasn't just caught in someone else's game. She was part of it. The next morning began with silence, the kind that sits heavy in the air before something breaks. Mila woke to the smell of burnt toast and the sound of her mother pacing in the kitchen. Linda's movements were sharp, impatient. She turned as Mila walked in. "You didn't come home until after midnight," Linda said. Her tone clipped. "Where were you?" Mila hesitated. "I was just out, walking." Her mother crossed her arms. "Don't lie to me. You've been jumpy for days. If you're mixed up in something, you'd better tell me now." Mila's mouth opened, but nothing came out. How could she explain that she'd met a stranger in a library, that she'd run from shadowed footsteps, that she was holding evidence powerful enough to ruin billionaires? "I'm fine, Mom," she said softly. "I promise." Linda's eyes softened just a little, the way they always did when anger met worry. "Just be careful, baby. The world doesn't forgive girls who don't know their place." Mila's chest ached at that. She kissed her mother's cheek before leaving for school, but she didn't go there. Not today. Washington Square was half empty when she arrived that afternoon. The air smelled faintly of pretzels and rain-soaked pavement. She spotted Cypher Kid, whose real name, he told her the night before, was Theo, sitting cross-legged on a bench, typing furiously into his laptop. "Hey," she said, sitting beside him. "Did you find anything?" He didn't look up. "You weren't kidding. Whoever erased those files covered their tracks deep, but they slipped up once." Mila leaned closer. "What do you mean?" "The deletion signal bounced off a private server, one owned by Turner Global. But that's not all." He turned the screen toward her. "See this IP address? It's linked to a luxury penthouse in Midtown, registered under the name Victoria Reynolds." Mila's heart thudded. "She's in on it." Theo nodded. "And she's good. But I found fragments of one file that didn't get wiped. It mentions something called Raven Cross Holdings. Looks like a shell company used to funnel merger payouts." She frowned. "Can we trace it?" He shook his head. "Not from here, but I can pull more if I get remote access to a secured network. Someone on the inside." Mila's mind raced. "Ethan Reynolds," she said quietly. "He's the CEO. He might help if he knew." Theo looked skeptical. "You think the guy running the company will trust a janitor's daughter and a college hacker?" "No," Mila said, "but he might trust the truth." That same day, Ethan sat in his office, staring at an old photo of himself and Victoria taken on their anniversary in Paris. The woman in the picture smiled with soft, loving eyes. The woman he saw now was someone else. He was waiting for Olivia Grant's call. When it finally came, her voice sounded strained. "Ethan, I need you to listen carefully. One of my contacts at the Department of Financial Integrity just told me something. Turner's firm is under quiet investigation for racketeering." Ethan's pulse quickened. Racketeering. How long they've been watching him for months. Offshore transfers, manipulated mergers, fraud. They don't have enough to charge him yet. But if we could tie him to Ravencross Holdings, they'd have a case. He froze. Ravencross Holdings. "You've heard of it. I've seen the name in an old audit report. Buried in the footnotes. Victoria handled those accounts." There was silence on the line. "Then she's deeper in this than we thought." Ethan stared out the window at the skyline. "Send me everything you have. Olivia. And one more thing, find that girl. Mila Carter. She might have something that can help us." That evening, Mila sat on the edge of the fountain, watching as Theo's laptop loaded lines of code. The sun dipped low behind the arch, painting the sky in soft orange streaks. "Someone's trying to track your phone," Theo said suddenly. "You've got a live trace ping from a masked number." Mila's blood went cold. Who would do that? Take your pick, Turner. Victoria. Or someone who works for them. He closed the laptop. "You need to lay low for a while." "I can't," Mila said firmly. "Not until I finish this." Theo looked at her, seeing the quiet fire in her eyes. "You sound like someone who's not planning to live easy." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm just tired of watching people like them win." He didn't argue. Instead, he handed her a small flash drive. "I copied the partial recovery. Keep it close. And Mila, if anything happens to me, don't stop." At the same time, in a sleek penthouse overlooking the Hudson, Victoria poured herself another glass of wine. Blake Turner sat on the couch, scrolling through his tablet. "She's still digging," he said. "The girl, Mila Carter. My team traced her phone to the Lower East Side." Victoria swirled her glass slowly. "She's cleverer than she looks. Ethan's probably starting to suspect me, too." Blake smirked. Let him. It won't matter when we're done. Coleman Capital will collapse before he gets the chance to act. Victoria's voice hardened. I'm not interested in collapse. I want control. You promised that once the merger went through, we'd rebuild under my name. Blake's grin widened. We will. You'll get your empire, and I'll make sure no teenage janitor ruins it. But even as he said it, Victoria's expression shifted, part guilt, part calculation. Deep down, she knew things were spiraling faster than she could control. Later that night, Ethan received an email from an unknown address. No subject line, no sender name. Just one sentence. She has what you're looking for. Washington Square. The girl. He read it twice, then grabbed his coat. The next morning, the air over New York was thick with fog. Mila and Theo met at a small coffee shop near the park. She handed him her phone. Can you block whoever's tracking me? Already did, he said. But if they're watching your movements physically, that's harder to stop. As he spoke, the bell above the door jingled. Mila looked up and froze. Ethan Reynolds stood there, dressed in a dark coat, eyes sharp but tired. Theo tensed. You know him? Mila nodded slowly. That's him. Ethan walked straight to their table. Mila Carter. She stood, unsure if she should run or sit. Yes, sir. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. And maybe more than that. Theo looked between them. You're the guy she saved. Ethan ignored him. I need to know everything you found about Turner Global and Ravencross Holdings. Mila studied his face. There was no arrogance there, just weariness and something like regret. Why now, she asked. You didn't believe me before. I believe you now, he said, because I finally started looking for myself. She hesitated, then slid the flash drive across the table. This is what's left. The rest was wiped. Ethan took it carefully, as though it were made of glass. You're in danger because of this. I know, she said simply, but I'm not stopping. He nodded once. Then neither am I. For a moment, the three of them sat in silence, as the noise of the city buzzed around them horns. Footsteps, the clatter of cups. Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing streaks of sunlight breaking through. It felt like a small sign, but it was enough. Somewhere in that light, both of them knew the same truth. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much larger, something that would either save them or destroy them. The coffee shop emptied slowly after Ethan sat down with Mila and Theo. The late morning light slid across the tables, catching the dust in thin, gold streaks. The three of them leaned close, voices low. Ethan's fingers drummed lightly on the flash drive between them. If what's on this drive is true, Turner and my wife have committed federal crimes. But before I take this to the authorities, I need something undeniable, something they can't twist or erase. Theo adjusted his glasses. They've already wiped most of the original data. But if I can access your company's internal servers, I can pull metadata digital fingerprints that prove the documents existed. Ethan hesitated. That's dangerous. You'd be hacking into a corporation with federal contracts. Theo smirked. I don't call it hacking. I call it creative access. Mila cut in quietly. He can do it, Mr. Reynolds. But if we do this, we can't go halfway. You have to be ready for them to fight back. Ethan looked at her, really looked. There was steel in her voice, calm, measured, but unyielding. You're not like most people your age, he said. Mila shrugged. Most people my age don't see what I've seen. For a brief second, he saw something familiar in her eyes. Pain, but also resolve. It reminded him of the version of himself before power had dulled his sense of right and wrong. "Fine," he said. "We do this together, but no one else can know. Not yet." Theo cracked his knuckles. "Then I'll need access to your private network." Tonight, by sunset, the city had shifted into its evening rhythm horns blaring, lights flickering to life one by one, the pulse of New York in full swing. Mila and Theo followed Ethan through a side entrance of Coleman Tower, using his ID card to bypass the front security desk. "Stay close," Ethan said. "After hours, only the executive elevators work." They rode to the 39th floor in silence. When the doors opened, the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and printer ink. Rows of glass offices stretched ahead, empty but spotless. "This is where it started," Ethan murmured. "All the deals, all the lies." Theo set up his laptop on a conference table. "Give me your admin login." Ethan hesitated, then typed his credentials. Theo's fingers flew across the keyboard, code streaming across the screen. "I'm in. Pulling network access logs now." Lines of data appeared, time-stamped and color-coded. Then Theo froze. "Hold up. Someone's logged in right now from your wife's credentials." Ethan's eyes darkened. From where Theo scrolled fast. "Penthouse IP. Midtown." Ethan stepped back. "Mind racing. She's covering her tracks. She must have realized I was looking." Mila watched his expression shift from anger to grim clarity. "Then we have to move before she deletes everything." Theo nodded. "I can block her remote session for a few minutes, but I'll need to spoof the network to extract the proof." "Do it," Ethan said. The hum of the servers grew louder, like the building itself was holding its breath. Mila stood by the window, watching lightning flicker over the Hudson. The city looked endless, cold, beautiful, and somewhere out there, people like Victoria Reynolds and Blake Turner were moving money and power as if lives were just numbers. Then, a sound, a soft ding from the elevator. Theo looked up. "You expecting someone?" Ethan shook his head. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Mila's chest tightened. "Someone's coming." Theo yanked the flash drive from the port and shoved it into his pocket. "We need to move." Ethan opened a side door leading to a stairwell. They slipped inside just as the conference room door opened. Through the narrow window, Mila caught a glimpse of two men in dark suits. One spoke into an earpiece. "They're here. Check the east stairwell." Her pulse jumped. "They know," Theo whispered. "I can get us out through the parking garage if we keep moving." They ran down the stairs, footsteps echoing. Ethan's mind raced. He had underestimated Turner's reach. Turner didn't just want to erase evidence, he wanted to silence anyone who could expose him. When they reached the bottom floor, Theo swiped Ethan's card at the exit door. Nothing. The light flashed red. "Locked," Theo hissed. "He must have revoked your clearance." Ethan cursed under his breath. "The emergency exit on the north side? It bypasses the system." They sprinted through the dark hallway, alarms beginning to sound overhead. By the time they burst into the cool night air, the city noises swallowed the sound behind them. They didn't stop until they reached a parking lot 2 blocks away. Mila leaned against a car, gasping. Who were those men? Ethan's voice was low. Private security. Turner's. Theo opened the flash drive and checked the data. "We got lucky. The extraction finished right before the lockdown. I've got everything metadata. Server logs, internal memos, signatures." Ethan looked at the glowing screen. "It's enough to bury them." Mila frowned. "So what happens now?" Ethan stared at the skyline, his face shadowed by the streetlight. Now we make sure the right people see it before they destroy us. Across town, Victoria Reynolds sat in her penthouse office, staring at her laptop. The files she'd tried to erase were gone from her system. Panic flickered behind her calm expression. Blake Turner's voice came through the speakerphone. "You said you could control him, Victoria, that he'd never suspect. I had it under control until that girl showed up." She snapped. "She's been digging since the day of the meeting." Turner's tone hardened. "Then stop her." Victoria's eyes went cold. "If I can't find her, I'll find him. Ethan's the only one stubborn enough to help her." "You do that," Turner said. "But be careful. The feds are sniffing around. One wrong move and we both go down." The line went dead. Victoria stood at the window, clutching the glass of wine in her hand. Below, the city pulsed like a living thing, beautiful and merciless. She whispered to herself, "You think you can beat me, Ethan? Let's see how far you'll go, or you'll." Later that night, Ethan drove Mila and Theo to Olivia Grant's office on Madison Avenue. The rain had started again, soft and relentless. Olivia opened the door in her robe, surprised but alert. "You look like you've been through hell," she said. Ethan handed her the flash drive. Proof. Turner. Victoria, the whole thing. She plugged it in, scanning through the files quickly, her brows knit together. "This is solid, but we can't just hand it over. We need to time this right, release it to the feds and the press simultaneously. Otherwise, they'll bury the story before it breathes." Theo nodded. "I can make that happen. Secure upload across mirrored servers." Mila sat quietly, exhaustion etched in her face. Olivia looked at her kindly. "You've done something extraordinary. Mila, most people would have walked away." Mila gave a small, tired smile. Most people didn't have to watch their mom clean up after lies like theirs. The room fell silent. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time, saw not a janitor's daughter, but a young woman who refused to be invisible. He said quietly, "They'll come for us now." Olivia met his gaze. "Then we'll be ready." Outside, thunder rolled across the city like a warning. But beneath it, there was something else, a pulse of resolve, the first hint that the tide was beginning to turn. The storm came in heavy that night, wind scraping against the windows of Olivia Grant's office. The city outside was a blur of rain and red taillights, the kind of night when New York felt both infinite and suffocating. Inside, the small group gathered around the glow of a single computer screen. Theo typed with quiet precision, his face illuminated by the light of code streaming across the monitor. "The files are uploading to the mirror servers now. Once they're locked in, even God couldn't delete them." Olivia leaned forward. "We'll need to coordinate the release. One to the Department of Financial Integrity, one to the press. If we time it right, neither Turner nor Victoria will have time to cover their tracks." Ethan stood near the window, hands in his pockets, eyes dark. "And if we're wrong," Olivia didn't hesitate, "then your name is ruined. My license is gone. And that girl," she nodded toward Mila, "will have to disappear." Mila said softly, "We can't stop now. Not when we're this close." Ethan looked at her, a flicker of admiration crossing his face. She was steady, almost unnervingly so for someone her age. "You remind me of someone I used to be," he said. Mila met his gaze. "Maybe it's not too late to be that person again." Before he could answer, Theo's laptop beeped. He frowned. "That's strange. Someone's pinging the server, an external connection request." Olivia stiffened. From where Theo's fingers flew over the keys, Coleman Capital HQ, and they're using top-level credentials. Ethan's stomach dropped. Victoria. Theo's eyes widened. She's trying to breach the same data we're uploading. Can you stop her? Olivia asked. I can try. His hands moved faster, lines of green text flashing across the screen. She's good. Probably got help from Turner's IT team. If she breaks through before the upload completes, everything's gone. Mila stood beside him, watching the code like it was a heartbeat. Then don't let her. Theo grinned faintly. Didn't plan to. Minutes stretched into eternity. The office lights flickered once, twice. Then the computer chimed. Done. Theo said. Upload complete. Mirrored, encrypted, and sent. Mila exhaled. So that's it. Olivia shook her head. No, that's just the beginning. Miles away, in the penthouse that overlooked the Hudson. Victoria Reynolds stood in front of her laptop, drenched in the cold glow of her own failure. Her attempt to intercept the data had been blocked. The words, "Access terminated," blinked across the screen. Blake Turner's face appeared on her phone, grainy in the dim light. You lost it, didn't you? His tone was casual, but she could hear the fury under it. Victoria's jaw tightened. They outmaneuvered me. Someone helped them. Probably that girl. You had one job, Victoria, and I kept your name clean while doing it. She snapped. Don't forget who gave you access to Coleman's files in the first place. There was silence on the line before Turner said quietly, If that data reaches the feds, you'll go down first. Don't think I'll protect you. The line went dead. For a moment, Victoria just stood there, shaking not from fear, but from rage. Then she hurled the phone against the wall. The glass shattered, scattering like stars across the marble floor. She looked at her reflection in the dark window. The city stretched endlessly below her, indifferent. She whispered to herself, You think you can destroy me. Ethan, you forget who built this empire beside you. Her reflection didn't answer, but her eyes hardened. If I go down, she said, I'm taking you with me. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The air carried that heavy quiet that follows a storm, the streets slick and gleaming under the first rays of sunlight. Olivia poured herself another cup of coffee and checked her email. Her phone buzzed before she could take a sip. The message was brief. The files have been received. Investigation underway. She allowed herself a small smile. They've got it, she said. The feds have it. Mila sat on the couch. Her eyes ringed with exhaustion, but lit with something brighter hope. So it's over. Olivia hesitated. It's never over that easily. People like Turner don't surrender quietly. Theo stretched, yawning. Then we stay alert. We've got backups of the backups. If anyone tries to shut this down, the internet will know before they can blink. Ethan looked out the window again. I used to think the system was unshakable, that power meant protection. But maybe power's just the illusion you cling to while everything underneath starts to rot. Mila's voice broke the silence. Maybe power's what you do when you finally tell the truth. He turned toward her, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. You ever thought about law school? She laughed softly. Let's start with surviving this week. Later that afternoon, Ethan met with Olivia in private. The office was quieter now, sunlight slanting across her desk. You know this won't end with just Turner, Olivia said. He's got ally senators, corporate investors, banks that owe him favors. Once the investigation becomes public, they'll come after you too. Ethan nodded. Let them. I've lived most of my life pretending not to see what I was part of. Maybe it's time to stand on the other side for once." She looked at him, a trace of admiration in her eyes. "You've changed." He gave a tired smile. "No, Olivia." I finally stopped lying to myself. That evening, Mila returned home for the first time in 2 days. Linda was waiting at the kitchen table, her face pale with worry. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "I called the police." Mila froze. "Mom, I'm sorry. I couldn't tell you. It was too dangerous." Dangerous, Linda's voice broke. "You're just a kid. Whatever this is, you can't fight people like them." Mila knelt beside her, tears welling. "I wasn't trying to fight. Mom, I was trying to stop them. They've hurt so many people, people like you, who work their whole lives and never get seen." Linda's hands trembled. She looked at her daughter's face and saw something she hadn't before, not a child, but a young woman shaped by the fire of her own convictions. She whispered, "You sound just like your father." Mila blinked. Dad Linda nodded slowly. "He used to talk like that, before he disappeared." Mila frowned. "I thought he left us." Her mother's voice was quiet. "That's what I told you. But he was a whistleblower once years ago. He tried to expose a government contractor. They said it was an accident. But," she shook her head, "I never found proof." The air in the room shifted. Mila sat back, stunned. Hiak tried to do the same thing I'm doing. Linda's eyes filled with tears, and I lost him for it. I can't lose you too. Mila reached out, holding her mother's hand. "You won't. I promise." But deep down, she knew promises were fragile things. By midnight, the news broke. Breaking federal investigation launched into Turner Global and Coleman Capital. Headlines flashed across every network. Turner Global stocks plummeted within hours. The media swarmed the towers, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions no one dared answer. Ethan stood in his office watching the chaos on television. He felt no triumph, only the quiet relief of someone who had finally laid down a burden. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over." He stared at it for a long moment before replying. "I know." Across the city, Victoria Reynolds packed a single suitcase. She moved through the penthouse silently, methodically. The news played faintly from the television. Her name wasn't on it yet, but she knew it would be soon. She paused at the window, looking down at the city she once believed she controlled. The skyline glimmered, indifferent to her fall. Then she smiled faintly to herself. "You won the battle, Ethan," she whispered. "But I'm not done playing." Outside, thunder rolled again in the distance, soft this time, like a warning of another storm still waiting to come. The city was restless after the news broke. Reporters crowded the entrances to Coleman Tower. Protesters gathered with hand-painted signs reading "Justice for the Workers" and "Expose Corporate Lies." Every headline screamed Turner Global's name. But what none of them knew was that the storm wasn't over. It had just shifted shape. In a small cafe tucked beneath the Brooklyn Bridge, Ethan, Mila, Theo, and Olivia met again. The place smelled of espresso and rain-soaked brick. Ethan sat at the head of the table, his face drawn but focused. "They're freezing assets across the board," Olivia said, scrolling through her tablet. "Turner's offshore accounts are being traced. Victoria's holdings in Geneva are locked, but Turner's disappeared." Theo leaned back. "No digital trail either. It's like he vanished into thin air." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He's not gone. He's regrouping." Mila sipped her coffee, trying to steady her nerves. The city outside seemed too loud, too alive for what they had unleashed. What happens to Coleman Capital? Now Ethan looked at her, weary. It'll survive, but not under my name. I'll probably be forced to resign before the board's done with me. Theo smirked. You mean before they offer you as a sacrifice to save themselves? Olivia glanced up. He's right. They'll want a scapegoat. The public needs someone to blame who isn't rich enough to disappear. Ethan didn't argue. He'd expected this. For the first time in years, he was ready to accept the consequences. Mila broke the silence. Then we need to go after the ones who still can't be touched. Theo blinked. You mean Turner? No, Mila said. Whoever helped him stay untouchable for this long. Her words hung in the air. Quiet, but sharp. Ethan studied her, a slow realization dawning in his eyes. You think there's someone above him? Mila nodded. There always is. That night, Mila sat by her window, the glow of her laptop illuminating the old wallpaper behind her. Her mother had fallen asleep on the couch again, exhaustion finally catching up. She opened a folder Theo had sent a data packet recovered from the corrupted flash drive. Inside, she found a document labeled Federal Contract 9B, Raven Cross Archive. When she clicked it open, her breath caught. The document listed a string of names and companies tied to government-funded projects. At the bottom was one name she never expected to see. David Carter, her father. The file dated back nearly 17 years long before Mila was born. David Carter had been an engineer contracted under a subsidiary of Turner Global. The report described him as a non-compliant employee terminated for breach of confidentiality. The case had been sealed. Mila's chest tightened. Her mother's words, from the night before, came back to her. He tried to expose something. They said it was an accident. She wasn't just caught in a fight with billionaires. She was walking through her father's unfinished war. Her phone buzzed. It was Theo. Theo. You still up, Mila? Yeah. I found something. Theo, you're not going to like what I found either. He sent a link to a dark web message board. The post headline read, The Girl Who Exposed Turner. Target located. Beneath it was a blurry image of Mila taken outside her apartment. Her pulse spiked. She typed fast. Mila, how long has this been up? Theo, less than an hour. It's spreading. You need to get out of there. She jumped to her feet, grabbing her backpack. Mom, she whispered, shaking Linda awake. We have to go. Linda blinked in confusion. What's happening? They found me. We can't stay here. Linda's fear turned to steel in an instant. She grabbed her coat and purse without another question. Where are we going? Mila looked toward the door, her heart hammering. Somewhere they can't find us. Meanwhile, Olivia sat in her dimly lit office, phone pressed to her ear. Agent Sullivan, you said you'd keep them safe, she hissed. If Mila Carter is being targeted, you have a leak in your operation. The agent's voice crackled over the line. We're doing what we can, but Turner's network runs deep. He's buying people out faster than we can protect them. Then work faster, she snapped, hanging up. She turned back to her desk and froze. Her office door, which she was sure she had locked, was slightly ajar. Hello, she called softly. No answer. She stepped forward cautiously, the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. On her desk sat a small flash drive she didn't recognize. A yellow sticky note was attached. You missed something. Her throat went dry. When she plugged it in, a single video file appeared. She hit play. The screen showed a timestamp, February 17th, 2009. a grainy recording of a man in a dim room, speaking into a camera. His voice trembled, but was clear. "My name is David Carter. If you're watching this, I probably didn't make it. Turner's people are covering up a weapons deal under the Raven Cross project. They're moving contracts through fake subsidiaries, and they're using Coleman Capital as a front." Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. The man leaned closer to the camera. "If my daughter ever finds this, tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her the truth is worth it." The screen went black. An hour later, Mila and her mother reached the back entrance of a rundown motel near Queens. The air smelled of wet asphalt and gasoline. Theo was waiting inside, typing on his laptop near the reception counter. "I traced the post," he said quickly. "It came from an internal server, Coleman Capital's private network. Someone inside your company wants you silenced." Ethan's voice came from behind them. "Not someone," he said grimly, stepping into the light. "Victoria." Mila turned, startled. "How did you find us? I've been tracking her movements." "She emptied one of her offshore accounts this afternoon. She's running, but not alone. Turner's still out there, and he's got money left to burn." Linda looked around nervously. "What do we do now?" Ethan met Mila's gaze. "We finish what your father started." Her breath caught. "You know about him. Olivia showed me the video." Tears welled in Mila's eyes. "He was trying to stop them too." Ethan nodded. "And now you have something he didn't. People who'll stand beside you. For the first time." Mila smiled through the fear. "Then let's end this." Across the river, in a dark warehouse near the docks, Victoria and Turner sat across from each other, the tension thick. "You said we'd be fine," she hissed. "That you had contingency plans." Turner leaned back, his smile tight. "I do, and you're part of it." She narrowed her eyes. "What does that mean?" He pulled out a small folder and slid it across the table. Inside was a printed arrest warrant with her name at the top. Her blood ran cold. "You set me up." Turner's grin widened. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Don't worry, it'll buy me time while they tear your life apart." Victoria lunged for him, but he stood first, smooth and calm. "You wanted power." "Victoria, I just wanted survival. Looks like we both get what we deserve." He turned and walked away, leaving her trembling, surrounded by the echoes of betrayal. That same night, Mila stood by the motel window, watching headlights pass on the highway. Theo slept on the couch, laptop still glowing beside him. Her mother rested in the other bed, hand curled around her phone. Ethan sat nearby, reading the old report about David Carter. After a long silence, he said softly, "You know, your father might have believed the world could change. Maybe he was right." Mila looked at him, her eyes tired but fierce. "It has to." Outside, thunder rolled again, distant but alive. The next battle was already forming on the horizon. Morning sunlight crept across the worn motel carpet, painting pale stripes across the floor. Mila hadn't slept. Her father's name still burned in her mind, looping in flashes between memory and disbelief. The video Olivia had shown her kept replaying the tired eyes of a man she barely remembered saying, "Tell her the truth is worth it." Ethan sat across from her, nursing a cup of bitter coffee. "You look like you've been awake all night." "I have," she said softly. He knew. All those years ago, my dad knew exactly what Turner was doing. He died because no one listened. Ethan's voice gentled. "And you made the world listen." Mila stared at the cracked table. "Not yet." Theo came in from the parking lot, laptop under his arm. "We've got a problem." Olivia followed him, coat still wet from the drizzle outside. Turner didn't disappear. She said, "He's in D.C. Just showed up at a private meeting with 2 senators and a banking executive. He's trying to cut a deal." Ethan cursed under his breath. "Immunity." Theo nodded. "He's going to sell out Victoria and anyone else connected to Ravencross to save himself. If he succeeds, everything we did becomes meaningless." Mila's pulse quickened. "Then we stop him." Olivia frowned. "That's not so simple. He's under federal watch now. We can't just walk into D.C. and accuse him." Ethan turned to Theo. "Can you trace what he's offering them?" Theo grinned faintly. "Already on it?" He sat down, booted up his computer, and within minutes lines of code flickered across the screen. "Okay. He's accessing a secured network using a ghost server. He's uploading files, classified contracts tied to the Ravencross project." Olivia leaned over his shoulder. "If he releases those before we get ahead of him, the narrative flips. He becomes the whistleblower." Mila clenched her fists. "He's stealing my father's story." Ethan's voice was low, determined. "Then let's give them the real one first." By afternoon, they were on a train heading south. Mila watched the city shrink behind her, skyscrapers fading into gray haze. Her mother sat beside her, quiet, one hand wrapped around Mila's. "Are you sure about this?" Linda asked softly. "You're walking straight toward the same people who killed your father." Mila nodded. "That's exactly why I have to." Theo sat 2 rows ahead, typing furiously. "I'm routing through federal open channels. If we can leak the unedited Ravencross files before Turner's meeting ends, we'll kill his leverage." Olivia looked up from her notes. "We'll need a controlled drop. No anonymous leak. We go through the same agency your father tried the Office of Federal Oversight." Ethan met her gaze. That office buried his case. Olivia smiled thinly. "Then let's see how they handle déjà vu." The train rattled through the countryside, and for a long moment no one spoke. Rain hit the windows in steady rhythm, like an old clock marking time they didn't have. Mila closed her eyes and whispered, "Dad, I hope I'm doing this right." In Washington, Blake Turner stood in a sleek conference room overlooking the Capitol dome. He wore a calm smile, even as federal agents lingered outside the door. Across from him sat Senator Keating, his expression unreadable. "You're saying Coleman Capital funneled government funds through fake subsidiaries?" the senator asked. Turner nodded smoothly. "Not me. Victoria Reynolds. She ran the laundering through her husband's company. I can provide every document you need." Keating folded his hands, and in return, "Immunity," Turner said simply. The senator's assistant hesitated. "That's not how this works." Turner's grin deepened. "It will, once you see what I have." He slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything you need to bury her and anyone who gets in your way." Keating leaned back, suspicious. "And you, I'll disappear. Quietly." The door opened suddenly. A young agent stepped in, whispering something in the senator's ear. Keating's brows furrowed. "What do you mean it's already public?" Turner froze. The senator turned toward him, his tone sharp. "The Ravencross Files Your Files just hit the federal servers. Every department has access." You care to explain that Turner's confident smirk faltered for the first time. On the other side of the city, in a dimly lit office of the Oversight Bureau, Olivia and Ethan stood beside Mila as the upload completed. Screens flickered with timestamps, digital trails, encrypted signatures all cross-verified against David Carter's original whistleblower report. The agent in charge looked from the screen to Mila. You realize what you've done? This doesn't just expose a company. It exposes years of government contracts, billions of dollars in fraud. Mila met his stare. Then it's about time someone saw it. He nodded slowly, then turned to his team. Run it. Send the confirmation to the press. Theo clapped his hands once. Ladies and gentlemen, history just hit refresh. Ethan exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders. He turned to Mila. Your father would be proud. But Mila didn't smile. Pride doesn't bring him back. No, Ethan said softly. But truth does something better. It keeps him alive. Across town, Victoria Reynolds sat handcuffed in the back of a black sedan. The news played faintly from the radio her husband's company cleared of wrongdoing under new management. The Justice Department naming Turner as the architect of the Ravencross cover-up. She laughed once, bitterly. You always wanted the last word, Blake. The driver didn't respond. She looked out the window as they passed the Capitol. For the first time in years, she felt small. Maybe it was never about power. She murmured. Maybe it was just about who could lie the longest. That evening, Ethan and Olivia stood outside the courthouse steps where cameras flashed like wildfire. Reporters shouted questions about Turner, about Victoria, about the whistleblower known only as the janitor's daughter. Ethan looked up at the cloudy sky. You ready? He asked. Mila stepped forward, her voice calm. For what? To tell them the truth. She faced the crowd as microphones thrust toward her. The noise was deafening. A reporter shouted, Are you the girl who exposed Turner Global? Mila took a slow breath. My name is Mila Carter. My father was David Carter. He died trying to do what I did today. He believed truth matters, even when it costs everything. And now, I know he was right. The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat before exploding in applause. Linda watched from behind, tears streaking her cheeks. Olivia squeezed Ethan's arm. She's braver than any of us. He nodded, eyes glistening. She's what this whole city forgot how to be honest. Later that night, Mila stood alone by the reflecting pool outside the Lincoln Memorial. The air was cool, the moonlight silver on the water. She pulled a small photo from her pocket, her father holding her as a baby, and set it gently on the edge. Dad, she whispered, I finished it. She closed her eyes, feeling the quiet hum of the city behind her, alive with change. For the first time in years, she felt peace, not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. Ethan joined her silently, hands in his pockets. You did more than finish it, he said. You started something new. She smiled faintly. Then let's make sure it lasts. Above them, the Capitol lights shimmered like distant stars, fragile but unyielding. The truth was finally out, and this time, it wasn't going anywhere. The days after the revelation moved like slow waves, steady, powerful, and impossible to ignore. Every news outlet carried the story of the janitor's daughter who exposed one of the biggest corporate government scandals in decades. Talk shows debated her courage. Newspapers splashed her face across front pages. And for a while, Mila Carter became a symbol of something people had almost forgotten: integrity. But behind the attention, the quiet reality of consequence was setting in. Ethan sat in a federal hearing room, waiting for his testimony. The once proud CEO of Coleman Capital looked older now. His silver hair had lost its neat polish, and the tailored suits he used to wear seemed out of place on him. He stared down at his notes, but his thoughts drifted. For years, he had told himself that compromise was the cost of success, that morality was flexible. Now, looking back, he could see how every small decision, every convenient lie, had led to this. When the committee chair finally called his name, he stood, straightened his jacket, and walked to the stand. The flash of cameras hit his eyes like sparks. "Mr. Reynolds," the senator began, "do you confirm your participation in the Coleman-Turner merger talks and your knowledge of the Ravencross transfers?" "Yes," Ethan said clearly. "But I also confirm that I didn't see what was in front of me, because I didn't want to. I signed deals without reading the damage they caused. I protected power instead of people. And I let greed convince me that silence was smart." The room went still. He looked up at the rows of reporters and government officials and added, "I can't undo what I allowed, but I can make sure the people who risk their lives for the truth don't carry it alone." Outside, Olivia watched from the corridor. She had seen hundreds of testimonies in her legal career defiant, guilty, broken, but not many that sounded like repentance. When Ethan stepped out, she nodded at him. That was brave. He gave a small smile. "I'm learning from the best," meaning Mila. He chuckled softly, "Meaning both of you." Across the city, Mila sat in a small park near the Potomac River. The crowd that once followed her had faded. The world had already moved on to the next story. And that, oddly, was a relief. Theo sat beside her, chewing on a piece of gum, laptop balanced on his knees. "So, you're officially famous? That's wild." "I don't want to be famous," she said, "watching a family feed ducks by the water. I just want to go back to school. Maybe get a degree. I've had enough danger for a lifetime." Theo looked at her, eyes warm. "You could go into cybersecurity. You've got instincts most pros don't." She laughed. "You mean paranoia? I mean survival." For a while, they sat in silence, the wind brushing softly through the trees. Then Theo said, "You know, Turner's going to prison. But it won't be forever. Guys like him never really disappear. You should be ready." Mila looked at him, her expression calm but determined. "I'm not scared of people like him anymore. I learned something." "What's that?" "That the truth doesn't just expose people, it frees you from them." Meanwhile, Victoria Reynolds sat in a federal holding facility, her reflection caught in the small square of glass that passed for a mirror. Her trial was weeks away. She had tried to reach out to Ethan once through her lawyer, but he hadn't responded. When the guard came by with her meal tray, she asked quietly, "Did they say anything about Ethan Reynolds?" The guard shook his head. "He testified today. Look calm." Victoria nodded, her lips pressed tight. "He always did." After the guard left, she closed her eyes. The sound of rain outside echoed faintly through the concrete walls. She whispered, "Maybe you were right, Ethan. Maybe the empire was never worth the soul it cost." She reached for the tray and saw something beneath it, an envelope, small and unmarked. She opened it cautiously. Inside was a single photograph, her and Ethan at their wedding. Young, laughing. On the back, in a familiar hand, were 4 words. "You still have time." She didn't know if he had sent it, but she cried anyway. That evening, Mila visited her father's old workplace, a shuttered factory on the outskirts of town that had once belonged to a Turner subsidiary. The windows were boarded up, the sign faded and crooked. Ethan met her there, the air thick with dust and memory. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "I owed him that much." Ethan replied, "He tried to stop me before I became this." They walked through the empty hallways together. Rusted machines sat like ghosts, silent witnesses to the past. On one wall, faint but still visible, someone had carved initials into the metal beam. D. C. Plus Ul. C. Mila reached out, tracing the letters with her fingers. "My parents," she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. He loved her enough to risk everything. "You've got that same fire." She turned to him. "Do you ever regret not seeing the truth sooner?" "Every day," he said. "But maybe it takes losing everything to finally see what's real." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan drove Mila and Linda back into the city. The streets glowed orange under the streetlights. Linda looked at her daughter in the rearview mirror. "I never thought I'd see his name cleared." "You did something I couldn't." Mila reached forward, squeezing her mother's hand. "We both did. You kept going when he was gone. You kept me believing there was still good somewhere." Linda smiled through tears. "I guess there was." Theo's text buzzed on Mila's phone. "Got word department's opening a scholarship fund for whistleblower families. Named it after your father." Mila's heart swelled. She whispered, "He finally gets to help people again." A few days later, Ethan stood on the rooftop of his apartment overlooking the skyline. The city looked different now, not cleaner, but honest. Olivia joined him, hands in her coat pockets. "They offered you a settlement," she said. "Enough to rebuild your life quietly. You could walk away." Ethan shook his head. "I think I'll stay. Help rebuild Coleman Capital into what it should have been. Maybe train new leaders who understand what integrity means." Olivia smiled. "Atonement through reform." He looked at her. "Something like that." Then he added softly, "You know, when this started, I thought Mila was just a kid with a sharp tongue. Now I think she's the reason I still believe in redemption." Olivia nodded. She reminded all of us. That night, Mila stood on her apartment balcony, watching the lights ripple across the skyline. The wind carried the scent of rain again, just like the night it all began. She opened her father's old pocket notebook, the one Olivia had returned to her after the investigation. Inside were his final words: "Truth will always cost you, but the lie will cost you more." She smiled faintly, whispering into the night, "You were right. Dad." Her mother called from inside, "Dinner's ready." Mila closed the notebook and took one last look at the city, a city she had changed without meaning to, simply by refusing to look away. When she turned to go inside, her voice was steady. "Coming, Mom." The truth had broken the world she knew, but it had also rebuilt something deeper: faith, courage, and the quiet power of doing what was right, even when no one was watching. Spring came quietly that year. The chill that had clung to the city for months finally eased, and the streets of New York bloomed with color again. People filled the sidewalks, chasing sunlight and laughter, unaware that the city itself was still healing from the truth it had swallowed and spat back out. For Mila Carter, the world had changed in small but permanent ways. The noise of cameras had faded, the interviews had stopped, and she could finally walk down a street without whispers following her name. Yet sometimes she caught her reflection in a store window and hardly recognized the young woman looking back. The calm in her eyes was new, a peace earned the hard way. She was now studying part-time at Columbia, thanks to the scholarship fund named after her father. Between classes, she volunteered at a legal aid center run by Olivia Grant, helping underpaid workers who had been silenced by contracts they never understood. Every time she handed someone a document and explained their rights, she felt her father's presence beside her. "Remember, Mila," Olivia said one morning as they reviewed a case, "truth isn't just about exposing what's wrong. It's also about building what's right afterward." Mila smiled faintly. "That's what Dad tried to do." "And now you're finishing it," Olivia said, her voice soft but certain. At the far end of the office, Theo sat hunched over a desk, surrounded by tangled wires and glowing screens. He had taken a full-time role as the center's cybersecurity consultant, though he still liked to call himself freelance chaos. Got another phishing attempt, pretending to be the Department of Justice. He called out, "Nice try. Bots." Olivia shook her head. "You never sleep, do you?" Theo grinned. "Sleep is for people without enemies." Mila laughed quietly, then returned to her paperwork. The sound of their banter made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time normal. Across the city, Ethan Reynolds stood before a glass wall overlooking the skyline from the newly renamed Coleman Foundation for Ethical Business. The company he had once led with greed now operated as a nonprofit dedicated to corporate transparency. He was mentoring a group of young executives that afternoon, talking about what he called the cost of blindness. Every system, he told them, breaks not because of evil people, but because good people stay quiet when they see something wrong. When the session ended, he stood by the window for a long time, watching the sunlight glint off the Hudson River. The city felt lighter now. Or maybe it was just him. His phone buzzed a message from Mila. "Mila lunch this weekend. Mom's making those collard greens you liked." Ethan wouldn't miss it. He smiled, pocketing the phone. He didn't think of himself as a mentor anymore. Mila didn't need one. What she needed and what he needed was simply family. Victoria Reynolds was released from federal custody under a plea deal 2 months later. The terms were strict community service, restitution, no corporate involvement for 10 years, but it was still freedom. She rented a small apartment in Queens and began volunteering at a women's rehabilitation center under a different name. The other volunteers didn't know who she had been, and she didn't tell them. For the first time, she found comfort in anonymity. Sometimes, she would see Ethan on the news, speaking at ethics conferences, and she would smile sadly. He had always been the better of them. One evening, as she closed the center, she noticed a familiar car idling outside. The window rolled down. Ethan sat behind the wheel. "Need a ride?" he asked. Victoria hesitated, then nodded. They drove in silence for a while before she spoke. "I saw your speech. You're good at this being human again." Ethan chuckled softly. "Took me long enough." She looked out the window. "You ever think we could have been different? If we hadn't lost our way?" He glanced at her. "Maybe. But maybe losing our way is how we finally found who we were supposed to be." She smiled faintly. "I'm glad you did. And you can too," he said. For the first time, she believed him. Back at the Carter apartment, Linda hummed as she cooked dinner, the smell of cornbread filling the small kitchen. The radio played softly in the background, an interview with a professor discussing corporate accountability. The professor's example, the Carter Reynolds case. She smiled to herself, stirring the pot. When Mila came in, dropping her backpack by the door, Linda said, "You've been working too hard again." "I like it," Mila said. "Feels right." Linda turned to her, eyes gentle. "You've done enough saving the world for now. Don't forget to live in it, too." Mila kissed her mother's cheek. "Maybe I'll take a trip after finals, somewhere quiet. Dad used to talk about Montana wide-open skies." Linda's smile softened. He always said freedom lived where the sky touches the mountains. Mila paused, looking out the window. The evening light caught her face just so strong, kind, steady. "Then maybe that's where I'll go." The weekend came, and the small group gathered for lunch in the Carter's backyard. The air was warm, the table filled with laughter and stories. Ethan helped Linda carry dishes. Olivia teased Theo about his latest tech obsession. Mila listened, her heart full. When the meal ended, she stood and raised a glass of lemonade. "To new beginnings," she said. Ethan lifted his glass. "And to the people who remind us why they matter." They all clinked glasses, and for a brief, beautiful moment, the world felt perfectly at peace. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Mila sat on the back porch as the sun dipped below the buildings. Fireflies blinked lazily in the warm air. She pulled out her father's old notebook again, the one that had started it all. On the last page, there was something she hadn't noticed before. Faint writing in the margin, barely legible. "The truth is heavy, but so are the lies. Choose which weight you'll carry." She closed the notebook and whispered, "I choose truth." Her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news headline: Corporate Ethics Foundation to launch Global Transparency Initiative. The world was shifting, slowly but surely. Mila smiled to herself. Maybe that was all her father had ever wanted, to set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. She looked up at the night sky, where the stars shimmered above the city haze. "We did it, Dad," she whispered. "We really did." And as the wind moved through the trees, she could almost hear his voice again, not words, but a quiet sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, the world didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a beginning. At its heart, this story isn't about power, money, or revenge. It's about truth and the quiet. Ordinary people who find the strength to defend it. Mila Carter's journey reminds us that courage isn't loud. It doesn't always wear a suit or carry authority. Sometimes, courage wears a janitor's uniform and speaks in a trembling voice, but it speaks anyway. Ethan Reynolds learned that redemption doesn't come from erasing your past, but from finally facing it. Victoria learned that guilt, if faced honestly, can turn into grace. And through them all, Mila taught us something simple but timeless. The truth might cost you everything, but silence costs you more. In a world that often rewards appearance over integrity, Mila's story calls us to look inward, to ask ourselves whether we've ever looked away when we should have spoken. It reminds us that one small act of honesty, done with heart, can ripple farther than we imagine. So if this story touched you, if it made you remember your own moments of quiet bravery or silent regret, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe. Not just to hear more stories, but to keep alive the idea that truth still matters, kindness still heals, and that somewhere out there, one brave voice can still change everything.